Man, this is Deion Dawkins, man, and you're listening to The Scoop on OurScoop.com. You already know.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to The Scoop, OurScoop.com's podcast. Season 7, episode 43. We'll call it the Darren Sproles episode, maybe. I'm John DiCarlo, OurScoop.com editor, joined by a mostly full house this week. Kyle Gauss, Dante Colinelli, Sam Cohn, and Caden Steele. What's going on, guys?
We are recording very soon after the NBA went into like a spiral and the free agency hasn't even started. So I think like coming off a little bit of a high of like the Kevin Durant news.
And that's not even the biggest sports news of the day.
Yes.
USC and UCLA going to the Big Ten is wild.
Ridiculous.
It's
It's absurd. I am not looking forward to watching, what is it? It's going to be like Iowa, UCLA at like 1 a.m.
Don't worry, because you're only going to have to watch that once every like 9 years because they're going to add so many teams to these conferences that's going to be like, oh yeah, Penn State plays USC once a decade. Like,
Yeah.
like Graham had like a objectively like kind of funny tweet about like how now James Franklin can actually accurately promise recruits that they'll play in the Rose Bowl because like USC's there. But like
this?
Graham did. But like odds are, depending on the scheduling format, you might not. Well, the Penn State will probably play like once every like 8 years.
Yeah.
It'd be crazy.
And we already did our Sam Newman wellness check because his Nets are in shambles.
Thank you for completely ignoring the last 60 seconds of conversation. We moved on from Kevin Durant.
I know.
I think the way this is going
I just
is
wanted to reach back to say.
I think there's going to be, for years, people have been saying there's going to be 4 mega conferences. I think there's going to be 2 massive mega conferences. And then there's going to be people like Temple and the Wake Forests of the world and the NC States of the world. They're just going to be out here playing their own game.
I want them to call it like the Big 64.
Just
or something.
Just embrace it.
Yeah,
they didn't change their name this entire time, but now that's more volatile. Like, you know what? Constantly.
Just the Big 64 or whatever it ends up being.
Kyle just pretty much skipped right ahead to the mailbag. At least one of the mailbag questions.
I don't read the script.
We'll just we'll just repackage. We'll just repackage that.
We were talking about the events of the day. It would have been disingenuous to pretend that we didn't see this one thing, that we wait until the mailbag for it to be brought to our attention.
What if we wait until the mailbag, John asked a question, and then we all pretended like it was brand new news and we had to react accordingly?
What?
I think he would have liked that. I think that would have been a nice present to John. But instead, this is the world we made. This is the world we live in.
That is applicable to a lot of different things. Anyway, Temple Sports.
Temple Sports. Any other famous 43s?
Dennis Eckersley.
Yes.
That's the only one I know.
Yeah, I would have gone with Sproles. Yeah, at a certain point we got to turn the calendar. We got to flip over the season. We have to go to next season.
When do we typically do that? What, in August, right? Like when it's
we have no rime or reason.
Isn't
normally we used to take a summer
of...
break? What happened to my summer break? There's no longer a summer break.
Screw your summer break, Kyle.
Recording a podcast is very stressful for Kyle.
Don't we? Don't we usually? I feel like we flip it over right before the start of like fall practices.
We should still be in season 1, episode 100.
How many episodes have we done?
Fall practices happen in like August, end of July or July.
This is Pop Warner, and you're listening to The Scoop on OurScoop.com.
Which is the problem.
My nephew, prior to his Pop Warner season starting off, twisted his ankle in a pickup basketball game or a summer league basketball game.
Really?
We'll see how it impacts the defending national championship Downtown Young Whippets.
That's a damn shame.
I think I've probably asked you this before. If Ryder like became a high level recruit,
I'd take money.
Do you? That wasn't going to be my question.
I'd also have him juice a little bit, just a little HGH. Like, see what happens. Like they're not piss testing you in high school. Just keep it going a little bit. Shave a tenth off that 40, man. Let's rock and roll.
Just sitting there being talked about like this. I should have been expecting that.
He hit me with a Candace joke the other day that I actually fell for. So like I have no sympathy towards the kid.
So what I was actually going to ask you, Kyle, was if Ryder becomes like a well-known recruit, would he give you decent scoop about his recruitment?
I legitimately think I'd run his recruitment. Like, I'm not even joking. Like, I think like I have enough experience, knowledge, and resources and like connections that like I would be involved in his recruitment. I think I would be asked to be involved in his recruitment.
Run or ruin his recruitment.
Run, RUN. I think I would coordinate his recruitment. So, Brandon Brown, head coach of Monmouth in 2028, whatever it is, reach out to me. We can get this done.
I love it. Anyway, Dennis Eckersley, Darren Sproles. Sam remembers Dennis Eckersley, does not remember Mo Vaughn.
Yes. Well, I actually only know Dennis Eckersley well enough because when I interned at WEI a couple years ago, that was during my internship was when he joined the booth, the Nesson, I guess it was the Nesson booth calling Red Sox games. And they went to a 3-man booth and it was like a whole big thing. So.
And you got to meet him and talk to him?
No.
I got two others here. One is a Hall of Fame safety with great hair.
Troy Polamalu.
Troy Polamalu. And the other one is the player that they say is always going to give trouble Embiid, and Embiid just bodies every year.
Pascal?
Pascal.
Oh, yeah. Pascal Siakam.
There we go. Is it good?
Yeah.
I have a few off the top of my head. Chris Humphries, when he played with the Nets, Kim Kardashian's former.
Here we go, Caden. That's a good one. There we go.
Trying to think of another one.
That's a good one, Chris.
That is a good one. That's a
Early
deep cut.
Kendrick Perkins wanted 43 at one point.
Oh, yeah. Perk was 43.
Oh, wait, I think I got one.
I think I got one types.
Yeah. No, I was Googling I'm Googling the team to make sure he wore it for this. Like a slightly above average pitcher for the Phillies in the 90s.
Not a clue.
Not a clue.
Slightly above average pitcher. Can you give me initials?
Or earlier 2000s. I think the initials will give it away.
First,
RW.
Randy Wolf.
Yeah.
I do know him.
Randy Wolf. This had to be 10, 15 years ago. Todd Zalecki and I went to go see a Coldplay concert at whatever the place across the river in Camden was called, whether it was
Tweeter at the time. It would have been Tweeter.
Probably. We're walking away and we hear somebody say Zoe, and it was Randy Wolf. And he's like, Wolfie, what's going on? And I guess they knew each other from like him covering the team. And
as opposed to
walking under, we're walking under.
They knew each other from Baccarat.
It could have been that too. So we're walking through like this echoey, like tunnel type of thing, and people start doing this Eagles chant again and again and again. And I said, they even do this at the ballpark, right? And he looks at me, he goes, yeah. I said, what do you think of that when you hear that? And he just goes, real original.
So no, they weren't chanting my team's name while I got paid $13 million to play a game.
Slightly bothered by Eagles chants. I remember that. Never thought I would have a Randy Wolf story, but that's my Randy Wolf story.
That tells me that Randy Wolf was soft.
Yeah, he's probably got a nice life.
Yeah, he made career earnings. I'm gonna say, oh crap, it went away. I had it. $68 million. Had a nice life.
Yeah, very nice life.
Anyway, Temple Sports.
Speaking of having a nice life, Shane Dezonie has a nice life now.
It's been eventful since we last recorded last week. A bunch of verbal commitments for football, one for basketball. We'll lead off with the basketball news. We've been telling you for the last couple of weeks that we were expecting something to eventually get done with Shane Dezonie, the Vanderbilt transfer, and then he announced. Again, we're recording this on Wednesday afternoon, so he announced Tuesday night that he is committed to Temple. I think we told you last week on the scoop that he's been on campus, was at team camp, and we're just kind of waiting on confirmation for a couple other things to line up. So looks like he's in the mix.
We're off on the timeline, right? He announced Wednesday night.
Yes, Thursday. It's third cheese. I forgot what day it was. So I'm sharp coming out of the shoot here. Yes. He announced Wednesday night, and it's recording this on a Thursday. So yes, Shane Dezonie is a Temple Owl. Another piece for the backcourt. Again, we know he was a former top 100 recruit. Again, if you don't know much about his background, had signed with Arizona coming out of high school, and was at Vanderbilt this past year. Shot it pretty well in the limited minutes that he played. Didn't do much in the game that Vanderbilt lost to Temple in overtime back in December, but can shoot the ball early on in his career. Has been a little prone to turning it over, but still, a piece for Temple, a significant piece via the transfer portal. We haven't been able to confirm just yet if he's going to. He would be eligible to play this year. Just confirming whether or not he is going to be playing this year. Sam, you put a couple clips on Twitter last night, kind of just taking a look at his game and offering a glimpse into his game. What do you think this does for Temple?
I think surface level, it just gives them another backcourt presence, because that's kind of the thing they've been looking for, with obviously a lost in losing Jeremiah Williams and Ty Strickland. They kind of have to fill those spots. So in terms of what they're getting in Shane Dezonie, you touched on it a little bit. My understanding is that last year, he was seeing double-digit minutes for a good portion of the first half of the season. And then it was due to an injury from another player on Vanderbilt whose name I'm blanking on. And then once he came back, you started to see his minutes dip a little bit. But he's someone who in a small sample size showed that he has the potential to turn into a pretty solid sharpshooter, which I think could be really important for Temple coming off the bench. If he's someone who can come in, and I use the term play right away cautiously, because I don't mean play, 20 plus minutes right away, but if he can give them 10 or 12 minutes early on in the season, and that becomes a normal role for him to come in, knock down a few shots, maybe similar to what they had Zach Hicks in early on in the season, of someone who just come in and knock down a couple shots. I think that's a huge additive to what Temple wants to be able to do. He does turn the ball over, which is a big bad thing. If he can come in, he's super athletic. He can finish pretty well around the rim. He can kind of morph his body decently well. So I think if he can be an additive as a guy who can come off the bench, knock down a couple shots, and kind of help within the flow of the offense and limit those turnovers. I've read that he's a little bit foul prone too. I'm not trying to talk him down too much. That's not what I mean to do. But I think the cautiousness of what they're getting is, he's said to be a little bit foul prone and turn the ball over, but he's super athletic and shoot the ball really well. The question is, when he gets to Temple and he comes into Temple's offense, or comes into Temple at both ends of the floor, in whatever role that looks like off the bench, does he turn into more of a heavy turnover, foul prone guard that can't stay on the floor for very long? Or does he give them something legitimate off the bench as a scorer and someone that can contribute defensively? I think that's really all you're looking for from Shane Dezonie in year one, is can he be a guy to contribute legitimately as a two-way player off the bench? And then in year two, he would have to step up into a much bigger role when Caleb and potentially Damian Dunn are both gone.
Two things. Big bad thing made me chuckle. I don't know why. It just cracked me up. And you used the word additive twice, as if he's like an additive.
Did I?
Like an additive and preservative. That's what it makes me think of. Like,
interesting.
Like it's like part of like a cereal or like a fruit roll up or something like that. Just, I don't know.
I keep you on your toes with some of my language, I guess.
Yeah. That you didn't even know you used.
Nope.
So
I didn't realize I used it twice. Anyway, go ahead.
We would probably think that they're done at this point, right? Because now they're at 12 scholarships, correct?
Correct.
And we would probably think and reasonably assume that they're probably going to hold on to one to roll over or keep for a mid-year transfer potentially.
Yeah. The concept of rolling over is dumb in this day and age, because you're going to have so much roster turnover that you don't need to roll over. But I think having that ammunition in your back pocket for a potential mid-year enrollee is a benefit at this point.
Mm-hmm. And then another piece of just recruiting news or recruiting update, class from the class of 2023, Temple, again, so we're recording on Thursday. So on Wednesday, they offered Zion Stanford, a wing guard from West Catholic. I guess it's technically West Catholic Academy now, was a first team all Catholic League player. averaged 14.8 points, 5.4 rebounds, 2.3 steals, and 1.8 blocks per game. And his 59.6 field goal percentage led the PCL. So, a really good player. I haven't seen him play live. Sam, have you seen him at all in your travels, like any Philly live stuff? Have you seen him live?
Yeah, I've seen West Catholic play. I think I saw him play twice this year, and I saw them play a little bit last year, but I didn't watch him closely enough or watch them closely enough to give you anything of note.
Yeah, it seems to be, again, a couple of people I've talked to said he kind of, fits the mold of like a Philly player that is tough and is skilled, has offers from St. Joe's and Drexel, doesn't have, high major offers yet, but seems to be the type of player and type of person that Aaron McKee would want in terms of like a Philly kid who's tough, that they feel like they can develop and has some upside. Seems to be the general rub. Trying to get a hold of him and his head coach for a story. So hopefully we'll have some more details coming up there.
So I did have a story I want to tell you guys that I had very briefly mentioned in our chat earlier this week, which sort of relates to what we were just talking about and will be in my head is the perfect segue to what we will talk about for the rest of the podcast. Temple does have one scholarship left. Kyle had mentioned it probably makes the most sense to hold it for a mid-year scholarship. If that's the case, there may be someone already on campus that they could grab. Earlier this week, this must have been 2 days ago, I was playing basketball at McGonigal with a couple of my roommates. And I had just finished. I take my shoes off and I walked over to see one of my other roommates was playing a game on another court. And he's playing against these 3 kids, 2 of which are wearing Temple football shirts and one of them was not. And they were, how do I put this in a way that makes sense? Every time they scored the ball, they went absolutely ballistic. They were very excitable and had a lot of energy with each time they did anything productive on the floor, which was probably hilarious. I mean, my roommate was getting really annoyed because of their team, but it was probably hilarious to them. And I realized after, I didn't really at first glance recognize any of the kids. And then they came off the court and I saw one of them and I was like, he looks really familiar. And then I realized that player was EJ Warner, who is clearly now on campus, famously Kurt Warner's son, Temple commit, freshman quarterback. So I had said to my roommate that because he was getting so mad because him and EJ Warner started going at it a little bit, just like chirping each other. And because my roommate was talking, EJ Warner started going at him and hit 3 threes just right in his eye in that game. So if Temple needs a mid-year scholarship, EJ Warner, maybe he redshirts freshman year of football, he can maybe give a couple minutes off the bench for Temple basketball. You never know. But it was funny. I was very surprised because I mean, at first glance, he probably was 6 feet, but he looked like an inch taller. I mean, I'm 5'9", looked like an inch taller than me, 2 inches. But yeah, I thought it was funny that EJ Warner was hooping and hit 3 threes right in his eye. I thought that was funny.
EJ Warner is a Tinder 6 feet. Dwan Mathis changed his number. That's football news. Yeah, he's 11 now, like PJ Walker.
Didn't retire 11 yet.
Did not. Well, PJ wore 8 for his senior year because Rule wanted to make 8 like the marquee single digit.
Yeah, let me say this. You did do, in all seriousness, you did a good job recently of noticing and breaking down Jaleel White's shot.
Thank you.
Putting the fingers into the cookie jar, that movement.
Yeah.
Compared to the improvement in Jaleel White's shot, how would you break down Kurt Warner's shot? I mean, legit.
EJ Warner's shot?
Did I say Kurt Warner?
You did say Kurt Warner.
Well, we'll get to Kurt Warner in a second. Maybe you saw him play too.
I also do want to talk about Jaleel at some point, but I mean, it wasn't anything perfect, but he had a clean enough release. It wasn't any weird, awkward jerking movements. It was just a clean, one motion shot. It was solid. He was knocking him down, getting a high release point. He's knocking him down.
Yes, but you do actually before we transition over to football, getting back to Jaleel for a second, you're seeing some legit improvement in his shot.
I mean, it was based on one picture. But I think the biggest problem with Ja's shot, and I think we've talked about this a little bit, is the way his hand comes up is his hand flares out. So his thumb and the inner part of his hand starts to flare out, which puts a little bit of spin on the ball. It's a little bit harder to get a clean kind of motion with putting that motion towards the rim and all his momentum going towards the rim with backspin, because it spins a little bit because of the way his hand jerks. So in that picture, the first picture, his thumb is more in towards his forearm, and his fingers are like flared out. So you can see the latter half of like the hand push. Whereas the more current picture in his workouts or whatever, it's a lot straighter, and his hands come more down rather than out, which gets a better spin on the ball, and the ball goes straighter and more likely to go in the hoop.
Who needs Herb McGee? We have the younger shot doctor here in Sam Cohn.
What would be easier, fixing the basketball shot or doing like what I do when I golf, and just if I know it's going to go to the right, I just aim further left?
Should Ja play the slice in his shot is what you're asking.
Yeah. Would that be easier? Just like, hey, Ja, imagine it's a little further to the side.
No, because you play the slice hundreds of yards out from the cup. Ja plays it 25 feet from the cup.
It's all right. Yeah, it's all perspective. It's all right.
Coach Kyle.
An important question nonetheless.
Yes. We do have some good stuff there from Sam, and some interesting stuff from Coach Kyle as well. Maybe he'll be.
I wasn't coaching there. I was asking. I'm just a blank slate.
Shifting over to football, it has been an eventful week since we have last recorded the scoop. So Temple's up to 10 verbal commitments now. So since we last recorded, Tyrese Whitaker, outside linebacker, rush end type from Northeast High School, committed last Thursday. Conlon Green, who's a strong side defensive end from Penn Trafford High School out by Pittsburgh, committed last Friday. Kevin Terry, an offensive lineman from Clearwater Central Catholic, committed last Saturday. And then Eric King, an offensive lineman from St. Peter's Prep, committed Monday. So that brings him up to 10. And we're going to play a clip from my conversation with Eric King in a little bit here. Overall thoughts on this? Again, it seems like, just based off the sense we can get from like the positions that they want to address, how they want to fill out their board, it seems like they're kind of progressing in the areas they want to progress in. Okay, now I'll throw this over to you first. I mean, again, you've Javon's been helping us out with some recruiting coverage as well. You're obviously like close to this stuff. Where do you think things stand for them right now? And again, we'll get to some news that they're waiting on in the coming days, but of the 10 verbals they have now, what do you think of, what's going on in the last week or so?
I thought they had some pretty, good gets this week. Kevin Terry, the guy that you interviewed, or didn't interview, but you wrote about 5 days ago for Al Scoop. I thought he was an interesting get. Obviously, teammates with London Hall, so that Clearwater Catholic connection is interesting. They landed him, I think he's 6'6", 250. So a guy like that who's been very productive in the state of Florida, had offer from West Virginia and some other schools. So they're getting some guys, over bigger schools, which I think is, pretty impressive. But obviously adding some, beef up front with Eric King and then Kevin Terry. So getting a little big up front, you're gonna have to replenish, when Adam Klein leaves and Isaac Moore leaves, so they're adding younger guys. So I think they're, trying to build that up. And then defensively, you get Tyrese Whitaker from Northeast High School, and he seems like a player, he had a lot of, offers as well. And from, Javon's article, he talked about how the culture is different with Stan Drayton, and that's kind of like what convinced them. So, they're, it seems like they're building a more physical, like team right now.
And they're doing well in Florida. Even, I don't want to kind of with Conlon Green. I mean, they didn't get a guy from Pittsburgh who had like, Pitt, Penn State, Ohio State, like that type of level recruit. But again, I mean, anytime you can go into that area and get somebody, they've gotten players that from out there before. Whether they've panned out or not has been kind of, another thing. Most of the time they haven't. Again, that's recruiting country that has typically been dominated by some of those other programs. But that footprint, again, like you get a guy from Jersey and King, but it seems like they're kind of slowly but surely kind of like checking off some of those boxes. We've got a guy from Maryland. We've got a guy from Western PA. We've gotten a few more guys from Florida, and it looks like the class so far, again, these are verbal commitments, just to remind everybody. I guess we should note that, and we'll see how this plays out. Rivals Adam Gorney, I think, right, had been at the Miami camp, and Richard Dandridge apparently played pretty well at a Miami camp. And we ran that story, I believe, earlier in the week, that Played well at a Miami camp. I don't think he has a Miami offer yet, right?
Since then, they've added 2 wide receivers that are physically about the same size as Richard Dandridge. So that ship might have already sailed.
Okay.
But
So-
it's an example of Florida recruit, early commit. Doesn't mean he's shutting down his recruitment. He's still going to camps. You get something to keep an eye on, whether it's a Miami or it's a Louisville or UNC. Like there's always the possibility that these kids come in.
Yeah.
Or these schools come in.
Yeah. And something to keep an eye on too. And who knows? I mean, some of this might play out between the time we, finish recording and post the pod, although I doubt it. Jamari Ford from Miami's Northwestern High School. Looks like he's down to Temple and Jackson State. And then we were kind of talking about this earlier in the day in our group chat. Kyle pointed out that Jaquez Smith, another Florida running back from Jesuit High School in Tampa, he announces tomorrow. So then if he ends up committing, then again, we don't know where Ford's head is just yet on this stuff. But if Smith ends up committing to Temple, then Ford, if you listen to when I talked to Kyle Williams from Harrisburg High School, he told me that Temple's planning to take 2 running backs in this class. So if Smith commits, then Ford doesn't have a spot at Temple, but it'll be interesting to see. I think we'll know more about, how this running back situation is going to play out between now and
you never know.
Yeah.
I mean, Rule famously took 3 running backs, right? TJ Simmons, Rockwell Armstead, and Jagger Gardner in the same class.
Yeah.
TJ Simmons obviously didn't pan out, but they took 3 running backs. I don't think Temple's going to take 3 running backs, but it is interesting that Ford and Jaquez Smith are very different types of running backs. So could see it happen.
Yeah. And again, you make a good point. I mean, not that we're breaking any news here, but again, I mean, there's somebody from the current group has to prove themselves. And even if that is rushing for 600 yards this season.
Yeah. What if you fast forward? I mean, look, after, and that was actually, Rule took that after Jahad Thomas burst on the scene. He had a productive running back and he still took 3 running backs. But imagine we fast forward 6 months and you're dealing with, hey, the same questions are in that running back room for the 3rd straight year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe you just, you sacrifice another position group in the hopes of finally striking on somebody.
You think back to how Jahad improved too. I mean, when they took him, you're like, okay, good player from Elizabeth High School, but I mean, Jahad really, really worked on his game. I mean, again, I know you could say this about a lot of college football players, but I mean, he was a guy that was initially kind of catching some balls out of the backfield and then would get caught from behind. And then the following season, it's he looks a little bit more explosive. And then in 2015, the way he was putting his foot in the ground and planning and the moves that he made to get into the end zone against Penn State, against Notre Dame, he was absolutely not doing that when he first got to Temple. I'm not saying that that's how things are going to play out for Ed Sadie or Darvon Hubbard or Trey Blair, any of those guys. We'll have to see, but you're right.
And then by his senior year, he was wearing thumb wraps on different thumbs. It was an interesting.
I forgot about that.
It was an interesting start to the year.
I forgot about that. Yeah. Jahad Thomas thumb injury. Sure. We'll see. But I think we'll have more. We might have between this week and next week. I think we might have a better idea of how things are going to play out on their running back board. But like Kyle said, who's to say that they're definitely going to take 2? We'll play this clip for you here. I was talking about Eric King, the offensive lineman from St. Peter's Prep, and talked to him again. We're recording this on Thursday. I talked to him. We kind of kept missing each other. Talked to him yesterday and had talked about how things played out with his recruitment. Yes, at one point he had offers from Syracuse and Rutgers during his recruitment. And he talked to me, and you'll see the story that we have up on the site. If you're an Owl Scoop subscriber, at one point he said, I was going to commit to Rutgers in February. And I said, you know what, let me hold off. Let me see what else is out there. Then he was going to commit to Syracuse. And the day before, Syracuse was like, don't come on your official visit. We just, you don't have a spot for you anymore. And then things dried up at Rutgers as well. And then, along the way, Temple had re-offered him. The previous staff had offered him. The new staff offered him and kind of hung around. And he talked a lot in our conversation about how much honesty meant to him. And some programs gave that to him and some programs did not give that to him. And he praised Temple for being honest. And he talked about the connection that he had with Chris Wiesahan. You know, he talked a lot about Stan Drayton as well, but in this clip we're going to play for you here, you can hear how much he respects Chris Wiesahan and how highly he thinks of Chris Wiesahan, Temple's offensive line coach.
Honestly, everything they said, like, they kept it real. Like, they showed me all the guys that they coached here when they were at Temple before. Coach Wees, I know he was at Temple before.
Mm-hmm.
He was basically showing me all the linemen that he put through the NFL process, and I was like, it's not a coach that probably an O-line coach that probably has shown me that has recruited me and showed me something like that. Like that's different, you know. Like if you're telling me that because that's the main goal. The main goal is to get to the NFL. If you can show me how many people you got to the NFL, I believe that you can put me in the NFL.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you're talking about your conversations with Chris Wiesahan. I guess he was talking about like Deion Dawkins and Matt Hennessy and those guys.
He was showing me. He was basically telling me and showing me all his connections and stuff like that, and how all the players appreciate him for doing what he did for them and stuff like that. Yeah. So I didn't let that go over my head.
All right, so let's head to the mailbag. We've got a few questions to get to here. The first one comes from the screen name McKee1 from the message boards. The question here is just wondering how many freshman football players we intend to sign. By my count, I see we only have 11 senior scholarship players for this upcoming season. Decent question. Again, they have 10 so far.
Off the bat, a little inaccurate. There's only 8 scholarship seniors for this class right now. Like, are there people that are also going to leave? Sure, but there's 8 seniors right now.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Kyle, you're very good at tracking this stuff and kind of projecting this stuff. It's obviously gotten different.
Sure.
With the advent of the portal, I know we're kind of just spitballing here. They're at 10 verbals now. Again, we'll see who stays committed and how all that plays out. But do you have a magic number in your head where you think they would stop and say, okay, we're good at this point heading into the fall and we're going to leave these spots for the portal?
Yeah, look, I think in the end of the day, you're still expecting to sign. Overall, you're expecting roster movement every year, this year of 25, 30 a season. And the issue is, I think there is talks in the NCAA removing the 25 cap and just keeping the 85 instead of 25 a year. I think the thing is, historically, you talk about, recruit your base and then you take shots once the season's over. I think that's still the case, but I think it's changed a bit. I think before it used to be maybe you get the low hanging fruit and then you focus on higher guys, maybe that they get to spend more time on. I feel like you load the class with high school kids and then you figure it out later now. So it wouldn't surprise me if by November or December, there's 20, 22 high school kids committed. And then after the season ends, you figure out, okay, well, do we have to push out 3 of these wide receivers and take some kids from the portal? Is this kid good enough? Blah, blah. So I think in the end, it'll be 16, 17, 18 high school kids. I just think it might get to higher than that number, and then they figure it out later. I think that number might get whittled down. I wouldn't focus on 8 or 11, whatever scholarships, because there's going to be so many kids that leave. There's probably redshirt juniors on this team that, academically they're seniors. Academically, they're redshirt seniors because 2020 didn't count. Then they might just be like, look, I'm done. Like, is Ronald Gaines going to come back for a 5th year of long snapping? Like, I don't know. It might just be like a look, let's move on situation down the board. So I would still focus around 20-ish before we even get into the transfer portal.
Yeah. And again, I think that sounds very like a very solid projection. I mean, Stan Drayton's talked a lot about like, hey, yes, we want to be mindful of the portal, but I don't want to build this program through the portal. Again, we'll see. Again, these things are fluid. These guys adjust, but
look, I think you're still seeing high school kids get squeezed because of the portal.
Oh yeah.
I mean, initially it's because 2020 didn't count against eligibility, and all of a sudden all these people like just didn't have scholarships to give. I just think that if you're not one of those like top 250, 300, 400 kids, and you're like a 3-star guy that had initial Power 5 offers, you're seeing it with an Eric King. And probably with the Tyrone Whitaker too, to be honest, where it's okay, you had these offers, you didn't commit to them. Those offers go away quicker now than they used to in the past.
Yeah. I think in a different world, Eric King might have had that spot at Syracuse or might have had that spot at Rutgers. And then they're like, nope, we're moving on. Yeah. I think I talked to Kyle Williams about that a little bit. when he committed a couple of weeks ago, and asked, from his perspective, was he seeing things a little differently? He's like, yeah, I do think, and again, I'm paraphrasing here. Yes, I do believe that guys are getting a little squeezed, and then things work out more on the back end.
And look, end of the day, Temple can win a lot of games by being the guy that's there at closing time. Like, you stayed till 2 a.m., you were still available. Temple got the commitment.
Yeah, real quick, I was talking to a friend of mine who works in the recruiting department of a Power 5 school, and he was kind of saying that, like, we are shuffling offers a little bit more quickly than I remember when I started. Like, if you don't take it really quick, we are moving on a lot faster. So that is definitely happening all around the country, and kids are going to have to adjust. Schools are going to have to adjust. But like Kyle said, I mean, Temple has the advantage of being like, hey, we never went anywhere. We never screwed with you. We were upfront about it. Come here. So
Look, I mean, I think you're even seeing it makes sense, right? Because before, if I'm a Wake Forest, I'm willing to wait for a kid at Durham longer. But now my recruiting base is the entire nation. It's 130 teams of 85 scholarship kids. It's easier for me to go look up on a roster. Oh, that 4-star running back hasn't played yet for them. Let me see if I put things out there and see if I can get him instead of waiting for this kid from Durham. So recruiting is always fluid, as somebody likes to say, but recruiting is a lot more fluid over the last 3-4 years than it was 5, 6, 7 years ago. It's the Wild Wild West.
Dante, let me follow up on that, kind of not really going off script, but again, knowing that guys they're going to get into college, they'll have some sort of entry point, and then they could transfer up or transfer down or whatever. In studying the draft and doing, a big part of what you do, you think this will kind of are we going to see a different narrative in the future? Obviously, we're not going to stop seeing guys from the Alabamas and the LSUs of the world and all that stuff. But do you think we're going to start to see other draft stories where there's a mid-round, end of the first round guy from Coastal or Temple, or do you think we're going to start to see more of those stories because of how guys are getting squeezed, or do you think guys will just end up at the end of the day, they're going to end up at a big school regardless?
I think we're already seeing it. I mean, we saw the Patriots take a guard out of Chattanooga in the first round this year, right? And I don't know if he got squeezed out of a Power 5 offer or not, but we're already seeing it. I mean, we've seen the transfer portal kind of lose that stigma to NFL draft people as well. A lot of quarterbacks who have moved around in recent years have been taken really high, and nobody really seemed to knock them for that. So yeah, I mean, I think we'll see a ton of it. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how this works out with the other question that we talked about earlier is do these players who aren't getting a chance, these 4 3-star, high 3-star recruits who aren't getting a chance to play over some 5 stars at big schools, do they stay? How does conference realignment affect that? How good do teams, outside of, Kyle said there's going to be 2 Power 5 or 2 power conferences. How good do teams get kind of poaching some of the players who fall through the cracks? So all that's going to be interesting from the NFL draft perspective. One thing I will give the NFL credit for is that they don't typically hold a huge small school bias. And I think we've slowly but surely seen that dwindle to the point where I would argue it doesn't even matter anymore. And I think one thing that I have learned over the years is that recruiting stars matter to NFL teams. They care about that stuff. I would argue they should not, but they do. So these kids who are 4-star recruits, like you said, John, slipping to the Coastals of the world, if any of them slip to Temple, I mean, yeah, that's going to be a huge pull for them. That's going to be a big leg up for them getting their name in the back end of that first round or early second round.
Mm-hmm. And obviously, Dante's a lot more plugged in the NFL than I am, but I also think there's still the possibility for 1-year wonders, right? Like, if I'm a guy that got to Temple and I really didn't pop off until my junior year, I don't have to go to another school. If I had a good enough junior year, I can just declare from there. And you see with at a higher level, Aiden Hutchinson didn't do anything until this year, and he's dynamic. Kenny Pickett of Temple fame was kind of just around, and he has a monster year, and then you go from there. So I don't think if you're a Temple fan, you're like, well, we're never going to have another first round pick. There's so many places to play ball. There's so many different ways to find your way into a first round pick that I think it's still the same as it ever was.
Mm-hmm. So
even Arnold Ebiketie, we were aware of Arnold Ebiketie. Arnold Ebiketie didn't really pop onto the national scene until 1 year. He had a really good year at Penn State, and then they took off.
Yeah. Going back to, and this is a mailbag question. This is what I was alluding to when I said Kyle was jumping ahead. On the mailbag here, again, we started the podcast talking about the big conference realignment news about USC and UCLA leaving for the Big Ten. So this is from JHG722 from the message boards. Latest conference musical chairs has USC and UCLA leaving for the Big Ten. Will conference musical chairs ever help Temple get into a power conference? If so, what do you think it will take to reach that point? So Kyle, you said, and it sounds plausible that there could be just 2 mega conferences and everything else is like a second tier. What would it? I don't know.
I'll say, I think the way he meant the question was, is Temple ever going to be like in the show? Is Temple ever going to be part of like the upper tier conferences ever again?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think so. I think what could happen is these 2 monster conferences happen. The ACC loses guys there. Like, look, there's already talks. Like, it's crazy how quickly this stuff happens. Nobody knew about this, and now there's talk that it could be done by the end of the week. That USC and UCLA could be done like before July 4th. There's also already reports that are out there. The NCAA, not the NCAA, but Notre Dame can get out of its grant of rights for everything, for nothing but football. Like, football can leave without having to pay the GORs to the ACC. So it's like, okay, Notre Dame's always wanted to go to the Big Ten. Does the Big Ten also bring in more traveling partners from Pac-12, like Arizona, and take on all these schools? Maybe. And that chaos is good for Temple. Like, the only way you get your foot in the door at any upper mobility is by chaos, because if everything stays the same, nobody's adding Temple just for the sake of adding Temple. Mm-hmm. The problem is, if all of a sudden you do finally get in the ACC because 6 schools left,
what does that ACC look like?
You're in the American from 3 years ago. Like, you're in the same stuff. So like, I don't think there's ever a scenario. I think that ship sailed 30 years ago for Temple to be part of the haves. And even if they had done everything right, they still might be part of the have-nots at this point, because I think there's going to be such massive overturn that you're going to see schools like Wake and the NC States and Vanderbilts of the world who are in that tier who might just be like, look, like, we're not in that tier anymore. We're doing it. So I think if you're an optimist, you're expecting so much chaos that things blow up, that you are finally able to get into that more regional mid-Atlantic, Atlantic coast level conference that you've always wanted Temple to be part of. It's just, you're still probably going to be a have-not in that scenario. So it can be good, but I don't think there is unless a billionaire croaks tomorrow and makes a $750 million donation to the Big Ten on Temple's behalf. I don't see that ever happening.
You don't know that it won't.
So you are saying there's a chance?
Yeah, there's always a chance. Always a chance.
Final question that we have here via text.
Anybody else have opinions on that? It's a pretty major undertaking, or a pretty major event in the NCAA. So I'd like more than just my voice.
You explained my point perfectly, because the way the question was worded, I assumed that he meant like, would they be able to join what is considered a Power 5 conference eventually? But we're assuming that there's only going to be 2 power conferences, and I don't think Temple's always getting in there. I'll add another, there's a chance. Look, this is maybe just as unplausible as Kyle's scenario. There's also a chance where Temple becomes a basketball and football powerhouse, right? There's the 0.0 whatever percent chance that is. So maybe they play their way into it, or maybe a billionaire croaks and gives a $7 billion donation to the Big Ten. Those are really the only 2 ways, though, I think.
I will say, to add on to that last part, like, they can play their way into it. I think that's a good reminder of, like, every time this happens at the end of a realignment, someone goes, okay, it's done. It's over. And it's never over. It won't be over after this. Even if you have 70 schools in 2 conferences, fast forward 10 years from now, someone's going to be pissed off at being the number 17 school in that conference. And they're going to say, whoa, why don't we just go take our ball and go elsewhere? Like, it's never over. It's constantly moving. If I was a betting man, Temple's not in the American 10 years from now. I don't know where they are.
In the Big 35.
They could be in the Big 35. They could be in the Canadian Football League. They could be in the Chessmont League. Like, I don't know. They could be anywhere. This stuff's look, Chessmont League's good ball. All right. Shanahan's sneaky good. East and West always there. Coatesville. Like, it's that.
Playing games at refurbished Kerr Park.
I had that dream. I told you, I texted that like a week ago. I had a dream that Graham was trying to convince us that it was a good thing that Temple was now playing in Kottmeyer Stadium, which is like, it is what it is. So I think, like, to put a bow on it, chaos is good for Temple, but I'd still manage my expectations. Because hell, you know what would be really bad for Temple if this was a doomsday scenario is if there isn't 2 conferences and there remains a Power 5 and the Pac-12 says Memphis, SMU, like, come on down. And then Temple's really just like alone with like nobody of what you consider your tier of program, and you're just in Conference USA.
Mm-hmm.
Highs and
us a lot-
lows, ebbs
giving
and
us a lot,
flows.
giving us and our listeners a lot to think about. We'll,
I think the Pac-12 dissolves. So you guys look that.
we'll give you this question to close things out. This is texted to me from Pat Egan, our loyal listener from 97.5 The Fanatic. Gave us a shout out a couple weeks ago. Appreciate that on the morning show. Nice of him to do that.
Yeah. Well, I gave you a shout out. Well, he said the scoop. Yeah.
Yeah.
We appreciate that, Pat.
Yes. Shout out from me is a shout out for everybody. I mean,
Also, USC and UCLA is going to be done by the time this goes. They're voting at 6 p.m. tonight. People didn't know about this until 2 or 3 hours ago. 6 p.m. tonight they're voting on.
Yes. Pat's question is: it seems like Stan Drayton has done more in a few months with recruiting wise than Rod Carey did in 4 years. Am I totally off base because I wish Rod Carey nothing but the worst? I'll think of another question.
Wow.
He has not. He has not.
Can you repeat the question? I wasn't listening. And I went to go look in the script, and it's not in the script.
Kyle was the inspiration for that Anchorman moment. Ron, are you listening? No.
It's gotten worse. I feel like I make more typos than before. I pay less attention. It's father time, man.
How would, if we were to talk to Meg and I said to Meg on a scale of 1 to 10, how good of a listener is Kyle? What do you think she would say?
A 6. I'm like, okay. I'm not a great listener. I feel like
you talked yourself into that 6.
Meg and I constantly have like the back and forth of like, if she doesn't understand that, unless I'm actively like looking at you in the same room, like I did not hear you. Like she'll like say things out of the room and then be like, I called for you 4 times. I didn't hear you. Like, I'm sorry. Like, and we have an open concept house. You know, it's supposed to travel through. I got high ceilings. It should bounce around. Nothing. Like that door, if she was not in this door, I would not hear her. So that doesn't help my listening.
So not Pat has not followed up with the second question, but that's fine. We'll answer this one. Yeah. Again, it seems like repeating the question.
Can you repeat the question?
I'm repeating it. I just literally said to repeat the question for Kyle, and then you started to cut me off. It just seems like Stan Drayton has done more in a few months recruiting wise than Rod Carey did in 4 years. Am I totally off base because I wish Rod Carey nothing but the worst?
I mean, so I started covering recruiting for Al Scoop about a year ago this month, and I can say with absolute certainty there was significantly less verbal recruits this time last year.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about the bad like tail end of it. It did not look good at this point.
It did not look good. And obviously there's like a ton of context to put around that as to why it was like that. But like just from a raw numbers perspective, yes, he is doing more.
Mm.
I hate to play devil's advocate on this. I really do. But like we're talking about the tail end there. When you look back at Rod Carey's first class, like I think somebody asked this on the boards, like when's the last time Temple had this many verbal commits? And I think I had the number. Like Rod Carey's first class, they had close to 20 verbal commits at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And like they had 15 at the end of June. So like they had done it, because I think it's hard to recruit your first class, but it's also easier in a sense. Like you have nothing on tape to deter a recruit from committing to you. Like there's no recruit being like, like I want to go to Temple, but like Stan Drayton is 1-4 right now. Like, why would I want to do that? Like it's like hope springs eternal to an extent. And like he's such a polar oppositely different person than Rod Carey that I feel like he might almost have a little bit of a leeway here. I will be curious what happens if they have a bad season or if they get off to a cold start. Because like the thing that separated Matt Rule from a lot of other Temple coaches is they bounced back from a bad first year. Like there was bad taste in people's mouths about the Matt Rule regime for the first 24 months of his tenure. And then he ends up getting NFL guys out of that. So I think it's the next step for Stan Drayton, except for obviously winning games on the football field, is 1, keeping this class intact. And then 2, that next class, if you go 4-8 or 5-7 or 3-9, what can you do with that class? Because if all of a sudden this next class, you follow that up with an absolute dud, then is what it is. It's hard to come back from that.
Yeah. And I said this, I think earlier, I mean, again, we say this a million times. These are recruits. They haven't gotten to campus yet and played, but they have kind of dipped into areas of their, I mean, they talk about their regional footprint, but we talked about they've been successful getting guys from Florida, but so far so good. Like if you were to say, how does this class look so far in terms of geography, in terms of some of the other programs that are recruiting them? they at least seem to be taking the approach that guys like Al Golden and Matt Rule and to a certain extent Jeff Collins took, where like, yes, you're going to see some guys where you say that makes sense, and then you see a guy like a Preston Everhart who had no other offers, like, yeah, we took a tip from somebody, we brought him in, he played so well at camp, we just offered him, we don't give a damn who else offered him. But you've got your quarterback from Jersey, you've got a Philly kid, you've got some guys from Florida. But Kyle makes a really good point. I mean, that after that first season, I mean, like that loss to Fordham, it was like, being at the stadium that day, it was like, did that really happen thing? And Matt, stood up there and took some questions. I remember, I love Rich, but Rich tried to end the press conference after like 3 or 4 questions post game. And then Matt said, no, everybody's here to do a job. I'll stay as long as you guys need me. But yeah, he did bounce back from that. Again, Matt Rule wasn't dealing with the portal and all that stuff. But I think again, if Stan seems to be, and again, it's not anything new, he seems to be embracing that, like, we're going back to camps, we're going back to what worked here. And he's not, again, you can't really compare him to Rod Carey. They were trying to go get guys from like the Chicago area or the Midwest. I think Stan knows, not that I know, maybe they've got a guy from Texas that we don't know about, but I think he kind of knows, okay, I'm not going to get, I'm not going to get a whole lot done in Texas. But
well, I think it helps with that Stan Drayton was a bit of a journeyman. So it's not like he was like, oh, I've only lived in Texas, I need to figure this out. But the difference, going back to the Rule thing, is it matters how you lose. Like the way that Rod Carey lost for the last 2 years is when they lost bad. Like they looked terrible on the field. They looked terrible on the sidelines. They sounded defeated. Like it was all just broken. When Matt Rule lost his first year, he lost on last second Hail Mary to UCF. Last second touchdown from Gary Nova against Rutgers. Like they were close. They just weren't there yet. So you can sell that. Hey, you are the difference between Anthony Roby getting beat against Rutgers by Gary Nova pass and us losing to our regional rival. You're the difference, Sean Chandler. You're going to come in and start day one. And guess what happened? Sean Chandler comes in day one. And
of course, Matt Rule being a Temple guy who wanted to be there, and as opposed to a guy like Rod Carey, who was, we might have said at first, kind of almost like unfairly scrutinized, like fan base saying he's not one of ours, he's from the Midwest, and turned out to not work out. But I don't know. Right. Anyway, so Pat, bottom line is Pat Egan wishes Rod Carey the worst. Stan Drayton seems to be doing a pretty solid job of recruiting so far. Any other closing thoughts here, guys? We did get Sam back safely from California.
We haven't even told the ridiculous coincidence that Sam and I discovered.
I'm cool out with that.
I had something called a progressive dinner in my neighborhood last weekend, which
not to be confused with a block party.
No, because it's not the same thing.
What? I know. A progressive dinner?
Yeah, I'll explain.
A bunch of progressives.
Open your mouth, baby birds. I'll feed you. We went through it. They've been trying. Apparently, they've done this 21 straight years, and they fortunately got delayed last year because of COVID, and they had it this year. And it's supposed to be, you start off appetizers at one house, then you go to somebody else's house for the entree, then you go to somebody else's house for dessert, and you go to somebody else's house for drinks, and so on and so forth. 3 stages of this. I don't really know my neighbors that well. We moved in during COVID. I know like a couple of them. But this is me meeting like the other 7 houses. And at some point, somebody's talking about like the history of our block or something, and they mention blah 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 Mermelstein. He
goes by either. I say Mermelstein.
Yes, he says either, and I've asked.
I say Mermelstein.
Like you could just give me an answer, Merm. You don't have to say either. You can. I'm gonna say Mermelstein. And then I mentioned, I was like, okay, that's file that away. Go throughout the day. Next day, text Sam, who's very much in the middle of his like I'm 22 or 23 and loving LA aspect. And I go, hey, does Merm live in my neighborhood? And I go, what's your neighborhood? Blah blah, back and forth. I get a call from LA. Sam Cohn.
You get a call and the name just says LA.
That's LA.
I get a call from LA. It was Sam. It was a payphone in LA.
Yeah, it's Sam, West Coast, but it's Merm, and Merm's like, my dad. I hope Merm doesn't care too much about carrying out his grievances.
He prefaces by saying, "I'm going to blow your mind."
Yeah, he said, "Kyle, first of all, I said, nice to meet you. I'm going to blow your mind." I guess long story short is Merm's dad used to own my house, then sold it to somebody who sold it to somebody who eventually sold it to me. And then Merm moved back into the neighborhood. But the highlight was Merm saying, I was boys with Jason. I remain boys to this day with Jason. And I was like, okay, like, congrats, like your friend used to live in my basement. Like this, but yeah, very interesting. Worlds colliding.
And
LA.
well, first of all, I had no idea where Kyle lived. Apparently, I just assumed it was like generally in the direction of like where John lived. I just assumed. I
No,
also didn't realize that
Well,
Kyle,
you said
you
that
would
with such
move-
disdain.
no.
I mean, it's just that empirically, it's true. We don't live.
but
we live in opposite.
Cardinal different directions.
And I didn't realize that Kyle, I learned that you had moved after Jordan was born, not
Yeah.
prior to. But also the timeline of Kyle and I meeting each other is very strange because I joined Owl Scoop, I met Kyle, and then like a couple weeks later, he had a kid and went on maternity leave. And then
you know, a pandemic happened, and then
yes,
Kyle went on maternity leave.
maternity leave.
there was a
Maternity leave is for the
Mr.
for the
Mom.
mother.
oh sorry paternity leave, whatever.
The Al Scoop
Um,
paternity package
It's
package,
generous.
quite competitive.
Hey, what came first, the pandemic or the paternity leave?
Jordan was born January of 2020. So
Okay, yeah.
I probably
Yeah.
just after Jordan was born shut things
Yeah,
down. I don't
so-
think I covered our game that year.
My first Owl Scoop thing was covering Temple LaSalle at LaSalle in the opening of the 2019-2020 season. So I joined Owl Scoop. and
Which
then
I wouldn't have gone to. I haven't been to Tom
No,
Gola
no, I did
Center
that-
since
I was at that game. I was at that
John
game alone.
Giannini walked me to the bathroom.
Good. I was at that game alone. And then 2 months later, Jordan's born. And then, okay, crazy timeline here. I join Owl Scoop. Let's say it's November. I cover LaSalle game. That was the start. In January, a couple weeks in, I get added to the group chat. In January,
One of the early versions of the group chat.
yes,
Hmm.
in January, Temple plays Penn at the Palestra, and I will never forget this because this was the start of the pandemic. Temple plays Penn at the Palestra. Josh Pierre-Louis is not playing because he's sick, quote unquote. Never really.
Is this
figured out what happened.
January?
This is January 2020. January. It was right before Kobe died. I want to say it was like the week before Kobe passed away.
Yeah.
And Kyle texts the group chat and says, "I wonder if he has, or like maybe he has the coronavirus."
I said that?
And I didn't want to sound stupid. I had no idea what that meant, so I didn't say anything. But in my head, I thought you were making a joke about like him drinking, like beer.
He's got the Irish flu.
I didn't know what that meant, and I let it go. And then January, February, March, 3 months later, there's a pandemic and everything gets shut down. And then I don't see Kyle for a very long time, but obviously we over text. But
In my mind, not to turn this into a COVID show, in my mind, the pandemic didn't really happen until Duke pulled out of the tournament. That was like my big, like, oh crap. Like, because Duke, before the NCAA shut down, Duke was like, we're not going. Like, we're not doing this. And I was like, oh, well, all this is about to come to a halt. And
Yeah.
it did. And I went across the street into my Rite Aid in North Philly because I was working for Temple at the time. And I just bought a crap ton of toilet paper and went home. And I don't think I came back for 3 years. When I came back to my desk, there was just like a dead cactus. And I was like, oh yeah, I had this. I had a cactus on my desk. It didn't live.
I thought you were starting to say there was a dead cat on your desk. I was like, oof. Dead cactus, big difference. What a way to close out the podcast.
What a way to close out season 8.
No, we're still in season.
No, Kyle, I refuse to let season 7 die.
Oh, it's season 7. Yeah. I honestly thought this was season 8. Season 7 just fades away. It's the John Chaney quote.
Excuse me while I disappear.
Season 7 gone.
It's if people can see you doing that. All right. Thanks for tuning in this week, guys. Appreciate it. And we will talk to you next week when Kyle unearths some other rare gems about the pandemic, cacti, and Lord knows what else. Yeah. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you next week.